2 concert tickets, row C, seat 11 and seat 12, the Riverside Symphony's Spring Gala. I found them tucked inside my husband's wool blazer when I was taking it to the dry cleaner last Tuesday morning. I stood there in the hallway for a long time, holding those 2 small rectangles of paper. My husband had told me he was going alone. A work thing, he said. Someone from the hospital foundation had given him a spare ticket, he said. He didn't think I'd enjoy it, he said, because I always fall asleep at classical performances. Which is true. But that's not the point. There were 2 tickets, row C, seat 11, row C, seat 12, side by side. I set them back exactly where I found them. I smoothed the blazer, I drove to the dry cleaner, came home, and sat at the kitchen table for an hour drinking coffee that had gone cold, trying to talk myself out of what I was already thinking. My name is Dorothy. I'm 63 years old. My husband Gerald and I have been married for 38 years. He's a cardiologist, semi-retired now, still consulting 2 days a week at Mercy General. We raised 3 children in this house. We buried his mother together, then mine. We've weathered recessions and a cancer scare and one very terrible year when our youngest stopped speaking to us entirely. We have grandchildren who call me Grandma Dot and who smell like sunshine when I hold them. 38 years. And I was standing in my own hallway, doing math about concert tickets, wondering if I even knew the man I'd built my entire life beside. I want to be honest with you. I am not a suspicious person by nature. I have never gone through Gerald's phone. I have never read his emails. I have never had cause to. But there had been something different about him lately, a certain quietness that felt less like peace and more like careful management. He would step outside to take phone calls. He would close his laptop when I walked into the room. He started going to bed an hour earlier than usual, claiming fatigue, but twice I'd gotten up at midnight and seen the light still on under the study door. I told myself it was the consulting work. I told myself he was planning something for our anniversary in June. I told myself a dozen reasonable things. But the tickets, 2 tickets, side by side. The gala was on a Friday evening. It started at 7. Gerald left the house at 6:15, dressed in his good charcoal suit with the silver cufflinks I'd given him for his 55th birthday. He kissed me on the cheek. He smelled like the cedar soap he always uses. He said, "Don't wait up, sweetheart. These things run long." I watched his car back out of the driveway. I stood at the living room window until his taillights disappeared around the corner. Then I went upstairs and opened my closet. Now, I want to explain something. The Riverside Symphony's Spring Gala is held every year at the Harrington Hotel downtown. It's a fundraising event for the Hospital Foundation, the same foundation Gerald has been on the board of for 11 years. I have attended that gala with my husband more times than I can count. I know the ballroom. I know the layout. I know that they always set up a cocktail hour in the West Corridor before the performance, and I know that the catering is always handled by a company called Linden and Associates, because I once spent an entire dinner seated next to their event coordinator, a very enthusiastic woman named Patrice, who told me more about Canap logistics than I ever needed to know. And I knew that every year they need volunteer table hosts for the dinner portion of the evening. I had 2 hours. I found the gala's volunteer coordinator through the Hospital Foundation's website. Her name was listed as Beverly Marsh. I called the number, and to my absolute amazement, she answered on the second ring. I told her I was a longtime supporter of the foundation and that I'd heard they sometimes needed last-minute help with the dinner service. I told her I was available that evening. She sounded so relieved I almost felt guilty. "You're a godsend," Beverly said. "We had someone cancel this afternoon. Can you be here by 6:45? You'll just be directing guests to their tables and making sure the water glasses stay full. Very simple." "I can do that," I said. I put on my reading glasses, pinned my hair differently up instead of down, which I never do, and found a pair of plain gold studs instead of my usual earrings. I put on a white blouse and black slacks. Beverly had said volunteers would be given a burgundy sash to wear. I would blend in completely. I was a 63-year-old woman in a hotel ballroom. Nobody looks twice at a woman like me in a setting like that. Gerald would not be expecting to see me. He would not be looking for me. And I had worn my hair down every single day of our marriage except for the 4 days I spent in the hospital having our children, so the updo alone would buy me distance. I told myself I just wanted to see. I wasn't accusing him of anything. I just needed to see with my own eyes that there was nothing to worry about, and then I could go home and feel foolish and grateful and maybe laugh about it someday. That's what I told myself. I parked 2 blocks from the hotel and walked. The evening was cool for April, and the cherry trees along Merchant Street were just past peak bloom, dropping pale petals onto the sidewalk. I remember thinking they looked like confetti, and then feeling sad that I'd thought something so cheerful when my stomach was in a complete knot. Beverly met me at the service entrance. She was a small, energetic woman in her 50s with a tablet computer and the expression of someone who has been solving problems all day. She handed me a burgundy sash, a seating chart, and a bottle of water. She explained my duties in approximately 45 seconds. Then she said, "You're an absolute lifesaver," and disappeared. The ballroom was already filling up. I stationed myself near the entrance to the dining room, holding my seating chart, watching the guests come through. I saw Gerald before he saw me. He was standing near the bar in the west corridor, and he was laughing at something, a real laugh, the kind that crinkles the corners of his eyes. He had his glass raised halfway. He looked relaxed in a way I hadn't seen in months, maybe longer, and that looseness in his posture, that ease, landed in the center of my chest like something cold. Then I saw who he was laughing with. She was young, late 30s, maybe early 40s, dark hair cut close to her jaw. She was wearing a green dress and leaning toward him slightly, the way you lean toward someone you're comfortable with, and her hand was on his forearm. I gripped the seating chart. I watched him say something. I watched her laugh. I watched her hand stay exactly where it was, on his arm, and I stood in the doorway of the dining room holding a piece of paper with a table arrangement on it, and I could not move. 38 years. My husband was 8 feet away from me, laughing with a woman I had never seen in my life, and he did not know I was there. A couple approached me, needing to find their table. I looked down at the chart. I directed them. I smiled. I have no memory of what I said. When I looked up again, Gerald was moving through the corridor toward the main ballroom doors. The woman in the green dress was walking beside him. They weren't touching anymore, but they were walking close, their heads tilted slightly toward each other in conversation. I followed. I know how that sounds. I am a 63-year-old woman who followed her husband through a hotel ballroom like something out of a bad film. But I need you to understand that my legs were simply moving and my brain had gone somewhere else entirely, to a place where I was just collecting information, just watching, just a volunteer with a seating chart who happened to be going in the same direction. They stopped near the windows overlooking the garden. Gerald checked his phone and then put it in his pocket with the slightly impatient gesture he always makes when he's waiting for something. The woman in the green dress said something and gestured toward the far side of the room. Gerald nodded. She touched his arm again, just briefly, and then she walked away. And Gerald stood alone at the window, looking out at the garden, with an expression on his face that I had never seen before. It wasn't guilt. It wasn't the face of a man doing something wrong. It was something more like anticipation or nervousness. The look he gets before he gives a speech or before he opens a test result he's been dreading. He was waiting for something. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was our middle daughter, Caroline. I let it ring. It buzzed again immediately, which is Caroline's way, so I stepped into a side corridor and answered in a low voice. "Mom, where are you?" "I'm out," I said. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong." She sounded strange, a little breathless. "Are you at home?" "No." "Why?" A pause. "When are you going to be home?" "Caroline, what is going on?" "Nothing. I'll call you back. Everything's fine." And she hung up. I stood in the corridor for a moment. Then I walked back to the ballroom entrance. Gerald was still at the window. The woman in the green dress had come back, and now she was standing beside him, and they were both looking at the room's main doors with that same expression, anticipation, waiting, the barely contained stillness of people expecting something to happen. And then the doors opened, and our daughter Caroline walked through them. I did not understand what I was seeing for a full 3 seconds. Caroline? My Caroline, who lives in Portland, who I had spoken to on the phone not 2 minutes ago. Caroline in a blue dress I'd never seen, with her hair done properly for once, coming through the ballroom doors with her husband James, and both of the children, my grandchildren Lily and Noah, who are 7 and 5, and who were supposed to be in school this week. Behind them came our son Michael from Denver, with his arm around his wife Rachel. And behind them, and this is when my hand went over my mouth behind them, came our youngest, our Annabelle, who hasn't attended a family event in 4 years, who Gerald and I had both quietly stopped expecting to see at anything, who I had prayed for every single night with a specific and desperate kind of prayer. Annabelle, in a cream-colored blouse, looking older than I remembered and terribly nervous, scanning the room. She found her father before she found me, and I watched my husband, my Gerald, my husband of 38 years, cross the room in about 4 steps and put his arms around her, and I watched her grab onto his jacket with both hands like she was anchoring herself to something. And I stood in the doorway of a hotel ballroom in a volunteer's sash with my hair pinned up, and I started crying so hard I had to press my back against the doorframe to hold myself up. The woman in the green dress appeared beside me. "You must be Dorothy," she said. I looked at her. Up close, she was earnest and kind-faced and absolutely not what I had spent the last 4 hours imagining. She was also wearing a lanyard that said Harrington Hotel Event Staff. "I'm Melissa Chen," she said. "I'm the Foundation's new development coordinator. Your husband hired me 8 months ago to help organize tonight." She looked at the ballroom. She looked back at me, and then something shifted in her face. "Mrs. Whitfield, were you one of our volunteers tonight?" I wiped my eyes. "Yes," I said. She stared at me. "Did you know?" I asked. "That I was here?" "I had absolutely no idea," she said. Then, very slowly, she started to smile. "Oh my goodness. Does Gerald know?" "No." She put her hand over her own mouth. Her eyes went bright. "Do you want to? Should we tell him? Or do you want to?" "I need a minute," I said. She nodded. She stepped away without another word, and I will always respect her for that. I found the restroom at the end of the corridor. I looked at myself in the mirror, this woman with her hair piled up and her volunteer sash and her mascara tracking down her face, and I laughed. A real laugh, sudden and slightly hysterical. Then I cried a little more. Then I fixed my face as best I could. I took the sash off. I let my hair down. I stood up straight. When I walked back into the ballroom, Gerald saw me within about 10 seconds. He was standing with all 3 of our children, and he turned, the way he always turns when I walk into a room, as if there's some signal I send that only he receives. 38 years of marriage having apparently tuned him to a frequency I don't even know I'm broadcasting. He looked at me. He looked at the sash in my hand. He looked at my slightly ruined mascara. He said, "Dorothy." Not a question, just my name, the way he said it 10,000 times. "Were you a volunteer?" he said. "I found the concert tickets," I said. "In your blazer." He closed his eyes briefly. "I forgot about those. Michael used them. He flew in early with Rachel to help set up." Around us, the ballroom was filling with people I now recognized, couples from our church, neighbors from Sycamore Drive, colleagues of Gerald's I'd met at a dozen dinners, my oldest friend Patricia from book club, our pediatrician who had seen all 3 of our children through every childhood illness, relatives from Gerald's side who I hadn't seen since his sister's wedding 6 years ago, all of them here. "What is this?" I asked. Gerald reached into his jacket pocket and produced a small envelope. He held it out to me. Inside was a card, and on the card, in his careful handwriting Gerald still writes in proper cursive, which I have always loved, it said, "38 years ago you married a man who didn't deserve you yet. Thank you for waiting while I figured out how to be worth it. Happy anniversary, my Dorothy. I love you more than I know how to say, so I filled a room instead." I read it twice. "This is for our anniversary?" I said. "Our anniversary is in June." "I know," he said. "I wanted to surprise you before you expected it. You always figure out the June ones." "That is completely true. I have figured out the June surprises for the last 11 years running." "The study door," I said. "You were up late," I thought. "Seating arrangements," he said. "Melissa kept sending me revisions, and I was trying to write that card." He paused. "I wrote 14 drafts. Gerald, you were always going to see through it eventually," he said. "I told Melissa from the start. I said my wife has the instincts of a detective and the patience of someone who has no patience whatsoever." She said I was exaggerating. He glanced at the sash in my hand. "She'll be sending me an apology." I looked at the room again. I found Annabelle across the crowd, standing with Caroline, and she looked up at exactly that moment and found me, and I watched her lift her hand in a small, careful wave. I waved back. I pressed my lips together hard. Breathed. "How long did it take to get Annabelle here?" I whispered. Gerald was quiet for a moment. "About 6 months of phone calls. Michael did most of the heavy lifting." "She wanted to come, Dorothy. She just needed somebody to make it easy." He paused. "She's been wanting to come back for a long time. She just didn't know how. Some things break you open in the best possible way. The kind of breaking that is actually more like a window being unstuck, a long sealed thing finally opening onto air." I excused myself from my husband for a few minutes. I crossed the ballroom. People stopped me on the way. Patricia grabbed both my hands and said she'd been sitting on this secret for 2 months and it had nearly killed her, but I kept moving until I reached the far corner where Annabelle was, standing slightly apart from Caroline, holding a glass of water with both hands like it was giving her something to do. She looked up when I got close. She looked exactly like herself, and also like someone who had grown up in the years since I'd last held her. There were lines at the corners of her eyes that weren't there before. Her hair was different. "Mom," she said. That was all, just that one word. "Hi, baby," I said. She put down the glass. I put my arms around her. She was taller than I remembered, or maybe I was shorter, and she smelled like a perfume I didn't recognize. And she held onto me with her whole self the way she did when she was small, and I was the person who could fix anything. I can't fix everything. I never could. But I was there, and she was there, and that was the whole thing, really. We stayed like that for a long time. Later, after the dinner, after the speeches, after Michael stood at a microphone and told a story about the time I drove 4 hours in a snowstorm to bring him homemade chicken soup when he had mono in college, which I had completely forgotten about until he said it after Gerald danced with me to a song that the string quartet played because he had apparently called ahead and requested it. After Lily fell asleep across 2 chairs and Noah ate an amount of bread that was frankly alarming for a 5-year-old, after Annabelle and I sat in the corner for an hour and talked, really talked, in a way we hadn't managed in years after all of it, Gerald and I ended up in the hotel garden. It was past 11. The April air had gone properly cold. He had put his jacket around my shoulders. The city sounds were muffled from where we stood, and above us, the sky was doing something extraordinary, the way it sometimes does in spring, going deep and clear, full of stars. "I thought you were having an affair," I said. I hadn't said it until then. Gerald was very still for a moment. "With Melissa?" he asked. I didn't know her name at the time. He thought about that. "How long did you think that?" "From when I found the tickets until about 45 minutes into the party." I paused. "Give or take." He turned to look at me. There was something in his expression that was almost amused, and almost not the complicated face of a man reckoning with something. "I've been your husband for 38 years, he said. "You thought." "You were sneaking around," I said. "You were taking phone calls outside. You were closing your laptop. You had a second concert ticket and a story about why you were going alone." I looked at him. What was I supposed to think? He considered this with the genuine attention he gives to things that matter. It's one of the things I have always loved about him he does not dismiss. He doesn't say you're being ridiculous or you're overreacting. He sat with it. He thought it through. "Fair," he said finally. "That's all you're going to say?" "I'm also deeply embarrassed about the concert tickets," he said. "I gave those to Michael and forgot to take them out of my pocket, and that was sloppy." He paused. "And I should have been less secretive overall. Melissa told me I was overdoing it. She said I should have just told you there was a foundation event you didn't need to attend." "That would have worked," I agreed. "I wanted it to be perfect," he said. "I wanted you to walk into that room without a single suspicion. I wanted you to just receive it, all of it." He looked at his hands. "I'm not good at grand gestures. You know that. I've given you plenty of quiet years. I thought I owed you one big thing." I thought about the card. I filled a room instead. "You got Annabelle back," I said. "She was never gone," he said. "Not really. She was just stuck. Sometimes people get stuck." He looked up. 38 years ago, I was pretty stuck too. "And you waited." The garden was very quiet. Somewhere above the hotel, the city hummed its permanent hum, but it felt distant, like something happening on the other side of a thick wall. "I wore a volunteer sash," I said. "You did. I followed you through the ballroom." "Apparently. I cried in the bathroom." "I know," Melissa told me. I started laughing. Not the slightly hysterical bathroom laugh, a real one. From the belly, the kind that makes your eyes water all over again. Gerald started laughing too, and we stood there in that hotel garden at 11:15 on a Friday night, an old married couple laughing ourselves breathless, and above us the sky was enormous and full of stars, and through the glass doors of the ballroom I could see our children and our grandchildren, and 38 years of people who loved us, warm and lit from the inside like something worth building a whole life toward. On the drive home, I held the card in my lap. I read it again in the light of passing street lamps. 38 years ago, you married a man who didn't deserve you yet. I folded it carefully and held it with both hands. When we got home, the house was the same house it always is, a little cluttered, a little lived in, the kitchen light we always leave on still glowing through the window. Gerald unlocked the door and held it for me, the way he always does, a small and constant courtesy that I stopped noticing somewhere around year 5 and have been quietly noticing again for the past several years. The way you re-notice things when you understand they are not forever. I walked through the door. I thought about the tickets, the closed laptop, the late-night study light, all my careful arithmetic of suspicion, adding up to an answer that was entirely wrong. I thought about standing in a hotel ballroom in a volunteer sash, watching my husband hold our youngest daughter, and how that moment, that specific moment, was something I would carry for the rest of my life. Some surprises break your heart. Some of them put it back together. I set my purse down on the kitchen table. Gerald was already putting the kettle on, because we have had tea before bed every night for 31 of our 38 years, because old habits and good men are sometimes the same thing. "Gerald," I said. He looked up. "Next time," I said. "Just tell me there's a foundation event." He smiled. That slow, certain smile I fell in love with when I was 24 years old and have never once gotten tired of. "No," he said. "Absolutely not." I sat down at the kitchen table. Outside, it was spring. Inside, the kettle was beginning to hiss. In a few days, Annabelle would call me just to talk. She'd say, just to catch up, and I would sit in that same chair and talk to my daughter for 2 hours and cry about it afterward in the best possible way. But that night I just sat in my kitchen, in my life, in my 38 years, and waited for the tea.